Welcome everyone to Art World Escapes Virtual Studio Visits. My name is Asad Ali Jafri, and I am the Executive Director at the South Asia Institute. I'm also a curator, an artist, and a cultural organizer. I'm really excited about today's virtual studio visits because there are two artists, Mavish Chishty and Gunjan Kumar, that I've got to know over the last several months. So I'm really excited to be visiting with them in this way. I'm also excited because we're collaborating as the South Asia Institute on an exhibition with them that's a multi-site exhibition. It's going to debut at the South Asia Institute on June 10th and be up till August 15th. So if you're around, please do come visit. And that is the Sindhu Project, Enigma of Roots, which is curated by Lisa McKean. And what I'd like to do actually is show you some of the inspiration for that, some of the images. And I will do that now. And you should be able to see some of those images. And then we'll introduce our artists. Because I think it's really important to have some context for how they're working, what they're doing, and what they're being inspired by as well. And there's just a few more I wanted to share with you. And of course, you'll understand just in a moment why I'm sharing these and the significance of them as well. So I think we should go over to Amherst, Massachusetts first, and we're going to visit with Mavish Chishty. Mavish Chishty combines new media and conceptual work with materials and techniques of South Asian art and craft traditions. Her work has been exhibited at the University of Technology Sydney Gallery in Australia, Bogosian Foundation Villa Ampan in Brussels, Utah Museum of Contemporary Art in Salt Lake City, the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporan Arts in New York City, Imperial War Museum in London, and the Gandhara Art Gallery in Karachi. Chishti's work is in public and private collections, including the Foreign Office in Islamabad, Fukuoka Asian Art Museum in Fukuoka, and the Imperial War Museum in London. Chishti is an assistant professor in the Department of Art at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. She's a recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship and other fellowships and awards. Her artist residencies include Yaddo, Saratoga Springs, New York, Chicago Cultural Center, Vermont Studio Center. And Mavish holds a BFA with a concentration in miniature painting from the National College of Arts, or the NCA, in Lahore, Pakistan, and an MFA in studio arts from the University of Maryland in College Park. So please join me in welcoming Mavish Chishty. And she should be with us in just a second. Hi, Mavish.
Hi, Asad.
How are
So
you?
nice. Good. How are you doing?
I am good.
Nice
It's
to.
very gloomy all of a sudden in Chicago, like this minute. All the clouds came around
Oh,
us.
really?
So
Really.
yeah,
So beautiful, nice and sunny here, but I had to cover some of my windows because sun is very unpredictable and it can
of
act in
course.
different ways. Thank you so much, Asad, and thank you to Art World Escape for giving us this opportunity to have this conversation. I know we've been talking for quite a long time, and those were different kind of meetings. So I'm so excited to have this opportunity to dig deeper into the practice.
Exactly. I'm excited for that as well. And I feel like I'm going to learn more about you and your practice in a different way than I have so far. So why don't we jump right in? And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your childhood and also what inspired you to become an artist, because I knew you grew up in Pakistan. And I'd love to hear some of that story as a start.
Thank you, Asad. I'm gonna see if I can um, share my screen. That doesn't look right. Some troubleshooting here. Okay, is this better? I
Yeah,
think it
I can
looks
see
better.
that. Yeah, no, looks good.
Okay, okay. So that's a very good start to talk about the beginning of how everything started. I I'm I should start by saying that I'm a Pakistani-born immigrant that grew up in Saudi Arabia. So I think that that has a lot to do with what I was exposed to, and it needs to be said because it has informed my a lot of my decisions that I made in my life. So after finishing my high school, I decided to go back to Pakistan because either I had to do homeschooling or go to college from Saudi Arabia from home, or go back to my home country and get education there. I decided to go to National College of Arts because that has been the dream of my mother. She could not fulfill that dream. So, as you know, it becomes, your children sort of take that forward and make your
Right.
dreams come true.
Right. Well, that's great
So a
that your
lot of,
mother's dream was for you to go to NCA. That's a great one to
I
have.
know it is. And I think I was in preparation my whole life, preparing me for that. Now, uh, but I should also say that Saudi Arabia is a very unique place because living there, we weren't really exposed to any art form. We weren't going to museums and galleries, of course. But we used to go back home a lot, sometimes twice a year. And that really helped me see a lot of things differently. For once, one thing that I have to mention here is just driving around in Lahore is just amazing. I'm trying to find an image of truck art, and now I can't find it, of course.
And for
Anyway,
people
I
who
may
don't
have
know,
it.
because I grew up in Kuwait and we made frequent trips to Karachi more than we did Lahore,
Hmm.
but it's such a difference even in that like short flight, right, from the Gulf to South
Yeah,
Asia. And for people who haven't been to both of those places, everything from the architecture to your exposure to art to
right.
culture is completely different worlds. Even with all the South Asians that were living in the Gulf area, right?
Right, right. And I guess National College of Arts is also, as you know, is situated beautifully right next to the Lahore Museum.
Right.
I recall in my college days that we could just go across the street and not across, but just on the side, leave one
Yeah.
door and enter the other door, and we're in the museum. And we would see these beautiful paintings. Miniature paintings and other paintings by famous Pakistani artists, and I always was so inspired by all of that. I think just thinking more deeply about what drew me to miniature painting specifically, and my interest um, in understanding my own culture, and I think that again is rooted in my distance from it, growing up. That I felt this very strong need to reconnect and learn the trade and skills that I thought were either I wouldn't say dying, but the National College of Arts is a very unique institute that gives a degree in miniature painting, and I don't know if there are many in the world. It's one of the very few. So thinking about that, it got me really excited about that I can be trained in a way that I can make my own paper, my own paint, my own brush, and then I don't have to rely on any art materials. I have my own art materials. That access was also very empowering for me as an artist, that I don't have to rely on anything.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think that all of these things are in the back of my mind when I was deciding what I wanted to do in my art career.
And what about now? I mean, what is driving you to make art and continues to drive you to make art? And how does that manifest itself in your studio practice?
Yeah, I think it's an extension of my education as a miniature painter. It informs everything that I do, even though it may not directly seem related or relevant to what I'm doing. But I think that inspiration from truck art, from architecture, from these beautiful, beautiful paintings and that training, I think that keeps informing what I do. And I what drives me is, I would say, there's a lot of things. I'm a curious person. Um, I am questioning my surroundings. I'm questioning my past. I'm questioning my present. I'm questioning the future, where I'm headed. And I think that curiosity has led me to get deeper into these investigations of particular incidences that were taking place either right around me or through my visits to Pakistan, finding out from my relatives and family members about the political situation there. Particularly, I'm talking about here is the drone art project or the drone art series that led to series of paintings, to sculptures, to site-specific installations.
Well, why don't we stop the images there, because you're showing us some great work of yours, and I just want to kind of take it back a bit. You were first showing us some pictures of miniatures, right?
Right.
And then you switched over to kind of these drone-esque images. Can you talk about that work a little bit and what you were exploring here, and then going on to the installation you just showed us?
Sure. So I think that the way that I could see the paintings function as is in many different ways. They have detail, but they're also very colorful, and in many ways, beauty is attached to it because of its intricate detail and the use of color. And I was thinking of that as a way of drawing the viewer or the audience towards that subject matter that is the opposite of that. I was really interested in this juxtaposition of the imagery and the, you could say, concept behind the work, the thinking, the critique around this subject matter. So I think that all of that led me to work in that fashion. And I also was really interested in using these iconographic elements and symbolism that ask the viewer to get closer to the work and really question what are they really looking at. Some of these elements or symbolisms I also find are more universal, but at times they're more specific to let's say, an Eastern region. So really interested in this tension of all of these elements. But, again, tying back to miniature painting, my starting point was staining the paper with tea, using gouache, this water-based opaque medium, or watercolors, and working with those in a very traditional manner. And they're also sort of size-wise also relevant to what Mughal or Iranian miniature paintings were in that scale.
Yeah, it's fascinating because you are doing this thing where it's very process-based, at least in those images that you showed us, but it's taking something that's symbolically or aesthetically pleasing, beautiful, colorful, in a subject matter that's grim, horrific, terrifying, and putting that all together with this, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, that's correct.
And then it comes off of the paper, so to say, right, in these kind of 3D sculptural objects and installations as well.
Yes, yes. So I think talking like what you were asking about the studio process, and I think the process is starting something and then one thing feeding into the other, and thinking about the limitations and the possibilities to explore within that same theme, let's say. And I do work within themes or their projects. So with this one, it led from flat works on paper to three-dimensional pieces that you could see in, I don't know if you could even see them so far back in the slide, but they're three-dimensional wooden structures that are painted on, and then working with these models of, they look like almost toys, and then working with the shadow of those. I know that Kara Walker, who's really interested in silhouettes, and I use that language a lot and think about that a lot in my own work. I'm thinking about how understanding the silhouette of a flying object is also a way for a survival mechanism for people who live under drones. So always starting a painting from a silhouette and using the 3D models to go back to creating silhouettes and shadows through them. It's this conversation that I think is very direct or indirect between the paintings and sculptural objects. And then this project just kept going because it sort of led from one thing to the other to another. This one particularly is their charcoal drawings that are rubbings of frames that are left over after using the drone models. from the model kit. So as you know, there are these plastic shapes that are embedded in these frame structures, right? So this discarded material, using that as an impression for rubbings, led it to look visually like a kill box, which is what drone operators see on their monitors when they're looking through the camera of the drone.
Right.
So that sort of feeds, there's a back and forth conversation between these, and so and then it led to so difficult to explain this project because this is a socially engaged project where I went out to the heart of this country. I was in Nebraska City, and I worked with the local community there, participated in that I asked people to say the names of Pakistani deceased civilians, and I would ask people of the same age and gender to read the name from my list. And then those audio pieces were then installed inside these reflective dome-like structures that were installed at average height of a specific age group that had died in the drone strikes. And each dome would emit the sounds of a particular age group. So they ranged, and people were able to interact with them really differently. This installation was also accompanied by vinyl text on the floor, and some of the names were bigger and bolder because these are the names that I'm familiar with. Either I have friends of that name, and in this case, Naila and Kamran are my parents' names. So thinking about that 6 degrees of separation, right? I may not know these people that have died in drone strikes directly, but at the same time, I'm familiar with these names. I found the name of my nephew in there. I found the name of my uncle, and not to mention my parents. So that really brings it home, right?
Yeah, no, that's extremely powerful. And I think being able to see this in this way, and even what you're doing with the sounds, I think, and this performative aspect of the art is extremely powerful, especially when exploring these drone stories, as we may call them. Um, and I'm curious to know because I see elements of the work, especially when you're talking about the language of silhouettes, that's
Mm-hmm.
also playing a role in this newest project, the Sindhu Project, which is very much, in a development phase. However, the theme and the inspiration for that and the subject matter is quite different, right? So can you walk me through um, how your practice continues to grow and be shaped? And I hate saying grow or evolve because that's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily the right language, but how do you land at something like this collaboration for the Sindhu project?
Yes, this has been a very unique project for so many reasons. It has taken a long time for Gunjan and I to arrive at what it's going to take shape, what is it going to actually look like. Like I mentioned, my projects are not necessarily, it's not visually connected per se, but I think that they are, but also that one thing leads and feeds into the other. So when I met Gunjan back in 2015, I was still living in Chicago at that time, and I had since moved twice. But the idea, well, our conversation started by just, talking about our family background. Gunjan is from India, and her parents migrated from Lahore to Amritsar. And when she said that, I immediately recalled that my great great grandparents, they migrated from Amritsar to Lahore. That was just such an eye opener that how can we two people meet so far away um, from our home countries but have this connection of cross migration? It
Right.
I mean, and then it also is something that it's back of my mind is I am from a border city. Lahore is a border town that borders India, and Wagah Thori Baru. I've attended the ceremony. I've even created some works around this series, which is really interesting to me.
And for
But
those
thinking,
though that don't know, this is all the region of Punjab that has been split at partition and
right.
created these kind of borders, right? Within some people's living memory, even. And of course, these families going back and forth is a story that's told often, but it's still kind of the same region, technically speaking, right?
Right. And I guess then Gunjan and I started talking about what is it that connects us. We're both from Punjab, like then what is it that separates us? It seems like there's more that connects us than what separates us, and we were really interested in highlighting these connecting elements. And one of the major elements, is the Indus River and Indus Valley civilization that was formed around Indus River. I'm sorry, my slides is stuck on this one. It just does not want to move.
That's okay.
Uh,
Yeah, we can just talk. That's okay.
yeah, I will just switch over to myself so I can just talk.
Perfect.
But it seems like that, we were talking about this interest in that we want to share what is common, but also uh, not making it so specific to an area or location. As you know, Indus Valley is one of the biggest civilizations and crosses India, Pakistan. And so we decided we're going to do our own independent research and come up with body of work that is created in response to these sites that we have visited. I, of course, could not go to the sites in India, so I am limited to the sites that I have in Pakistan. I chose Texela for various different reasons. And I could go deep into it, but I don't want to take up all the time. My mother has lived there for a few years, so she had shared some of the stories about um, when it became part of UNESCO's heritage site. And, you know, I was just interested in that, visited a few times, and I took a lot of photos that I wish I could share. But they were very, just being on that land, being above something that I knew, things that I could see. But then I started to think about what are the things that I can't even see, what is underneath my feet. There
Mm.
is more history beneath us. So that just started to think about all of these things. And that's what inspired me to make some of these works that are large scale installations that are made in acrylic, and I'm using laser cutting and laser etching process as this reductive um, process of creating patterns that are also derivative of that land, past, present. I mean, I am exploring time, uh, and I'm not limiting myself. Why limit myself, right? I'm thinking this is all part of our culture. This is part of our heritage. Um,
And as
so
much as you're digging into the past in a way to get inspiration, to me, what you're building is like this interpretation of the future in a way too, especially in the way that you're working with this acrylic and how it's installed. And when you just look at pictures of what we've seen so far, even, I feel like that's an imagining of something as well. So I like that entire kind of connection and through line as well.
yeah, yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. I do feel like I'm just scratching the surface of things, like not just metaphorically, but also physically scratching the surface.
Right.
Right?
Right. You're literally scratching the surface on some of these, right? And so what is some of the symbolism? What are some of the messages that are being conveyed in your work? Because I know you're, especially with the Sindhu Project, because I know you think about this a lot. And there's a lot of what I love about both you and Gunjan's work is there's a lot of research, there's a lot of intentional process to it, and being able to be behind the scenes on that with you and talking to you as you're making and seeing the process. I think that's been kind of the greatest. Of course, when the exhibition opens, it'll be great, but knowing that as well has been great for me.
Yeah, there is a lot of symbolism. There's a lot of things that I'm thinking about. Even with the install of the piece, I'm thinking about this history of patterns. I was I would say I'm borrowing because I'm not inventing anything. Most of the imagery is either photographs that I took during my visit at that site, that then are transformed into these patterns that almost look like watermarks when it goes on acrylic as an etched surface. And then I hope they will also create shadows that will give another dimension to the works. So I'm looking at that, and I'm also looking at Ajrak, which has this historical significance, and then that beautiful fabric dates back to this to Indus Valley civilization in Sindh. that Ajrak is from that era. So looking at that, looking at architecture, Lahore Fort, Badshahi Mosque, uh, what is at my disposal? What is it I feel more connected to? Or what do I feel removed from that I'm trying to make that connection with through through my practice? Because I think that so much of this has been very informative for me. Through this process, I'm learning so much about my own self, my culture, and I think that there's a healthy exchange, I would say, that give and take. So I hope so.
And then I wish we could show, but I know that Instagram doesn't have the feature for me to be able to share images or you directly while we're speaking. But I think seeing this work in context is really, really powerful. I would like to talk a little bit about your last point, and then we'll bring in Gunjan as well. And at the end, we will take questions or discuss with the audience. So please go ahead and comment and ask anything you may want to ask. We'll bring Mavish back at the end as well. What about the collaborative process in and of itself? The fact that you are collaborating with Gunjan on this, who is looking at something in a different way, both in process, in region, in materiality. And then also you all are working on this multi-site exhibition, which I think is quite fascinating as well. So can you talk a little bit about that too?
Right. I think this is a unique kind of collaboration because we're not working on same projects or same paintings or works of art together. In the beginning, we decided that Gunjan's work will take space on the walls, and I decided that my works would take space horizontally, just in the space. And we also thought about that since we met in Chicago first, and that was the birthplace of this project. It's amazing that all our dreams are coming true, that we are sharing it in Chicago first. And then this exhibition gets split into two sections, kind of like how Partition did that to the two countries. So one half will go to India simultaneously. The other half of the exhibition would be shared in Pakistan, in Lahore, in New Delhi and Lahore at the same time. So I think that in itself is very meaningful for many reasons. And I hope that we can also travel, that Gunjan can come to Lahore and I can go to New Delhi. And if we can't, then, that still is very meaningful, I would say.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mavish, for this. It's been great to talk a little bit about your practice in your studio itself. I'm now going to switch over so that we can bring on Gunjan onto this conversation. And before we do that, I just want to share some more images of her work as well, and her inspirations, not just her work, I should say. So again, we're talking about the Sindhu Project. That's a collaboration between these two artists. And of course, we're also going to just talk about their work, their practice, and how it's manifesting. And I think equally important to their work is some of the inspirations that they're drawing from. So I will just show a couple of more images here. And I am going to bring on Gunjan Kumar. And Gunjan is an artist based in Chicago, originally from India. She has spent many years traveling through the interiors of India and other countries in Southeast Asia, observing age-old practices in art, visiting archaeological sites, observing prehistoric paintings, and other tribal arts. These experiences form the undertone of her art practice. Her process involves ground earth and minerals like shell oysters, clay, calcium carbonate, amongst others, using them as core mediums applied on natural surfaces, using techniques inspired by traditional methods. Her works have been exhibited at the Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art, the Donnelly Foundation, Chicago Artists Coalition, Chicago Sculpture International Biennial, amongst others. She's represented by Gallery Exhibit 320 New Delhi. And in 2020, Kumar started an education program called Nature Studies, with 2 workshops on nature as a medium in arts. These workshops have been held at the Chicago Art Department, Design Museum of Chicago, the Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art, the Pulitzer Art Foundation in St. Louis, and others. And they're continuing to be ongoing, including virtually. Kumar is a former resident at the Edward Albee Foundation in Montauk, New York, and is a graduate in textiles from the National Institute of Design and Technology in New Delhi. So joining me from Chicago, just a few miles away from where I am. Welcome, everyone. Gunjan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Asad. It's a pleasure to be here, and I thank both SAI and the Art World Escape to give me the opportunity.
And I'd love to give another shout out to Lisa McKean, who is the curator for the Sindhu Project. And together you all formed this team for the Sindhu Project. And it's just been a pleasure working with all of you. Gunjan, because we just left off talking about the Sindhu Project, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about it from your perspective and why you decided that this would be, something you'd put so many hours into working on.
Yeah, well, yes, I hope you'd ask me that. Because it'll be in continuation. And so yes, the Sindhu Project started as a series of journeys that began for me in 2013, and continued till 2018, just briefly after I met Mavish. And the first journey, I should actually first tell you the spread of, the Sindhu, Indus Valley civilization, which is the main, area where I am working as far as this project goes. So this area spreads between, northwest of India, northeast of Afghanistan, and most of Pakistan. So my first visit, and I shall also probably talk.
Oh, I think we just lost you for a second, Gunjan. Maybe in the... Okay.
Am I back?
You are kind of back. I can hear you, but having a hard time seeing anything. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. I think it's just the image that's kind of off.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Great. Let me just turn around the camera. So the first of the journey was, towards the Indus Valley civilization was a chance journey that I was visiting Gujarat in 2013 and happened to visit this place called Dholavira. And, it's a very powerful place in a way that, the Indus was a civilization which highlighted many key points of the South Asian culture as we live right now. And the guide who was walking us through was taking us through, the key features like the reservoirs or the grid systems that the Indus Valley civilization is really known for. But for me, as I was walking and as he was digging the ground in front of us, what really fascinated me was these broken pieces of pots, the shards that were scattered around the area. And my thought went to the fact that, these shards were once a complete pot. And, that pot was once in use. Somebody was drinking out of it. There was a life happening through this pot. And, as we I dwelled upon this idea. I came back and continued. The idea stayed with me. And I, started research about the Indus Valley and made my second visit in 2016 or 17 to this another excavation site, which is close to Ludhiana, which is my place of my hometown, where I actually come from, called a place called Sangol. And I visited there with my mother, and I remember that it was not a very active excavation site of the Indus Valley. There were excavations happening right from 4,500 years, which is the origin of the the age of the Indus Valley, and up to about 2,200 years, which is another layer. And my mother was kind of intrigued by the fact that why is this girl brought me to this bare site which is covered with bricks. And it's when we started to see and feel the marks of human touch, the hands on bricks, or a place where a cooking place where the fire was once was kind of lit to make food, or basically the life started to seem very real. It sort of was a very real and a surreal moment at the same time. So I basically came back to the idea, and then it was just a kind of like going back to the broken pots and the shards that I spoke about earlier. that became my main, kind of memory of these visits. That these shards were once a complete pot, and there was a kind of wanted me to actually complete that pot, and not just kind of physically, but also metaphorically, to complete the land that is now divided between these three countries. And now when I come to when these three countries came to picture, particularly the two countries that stood out for me were India and Pakistan, because of the history that we've had. And then the whole family lineage came through. Like Mavish mentioned, that my grandfather had migrated back in 1947 from Pakistan to India. And it just, this is an image of an exhibition I'd visited about a few years back, which about shared legacies. And I was actually tracking my own lineage, and it just felt that, we traveled so less, and yet we traveled so far. In our distances, we traveled really, really less, but in our minds, and, it was a long journey that we'd made, And so in a way, it just sort of, the whole idea, and I kept living through the idea, as Mavish said, it took us a long time to really sort of to take the courage to plunge into this project. So yes, that's what stayed with me, and I think that's basically the base of how the idea sprouted and how it began to take form further.
Well, take us back a little bit further then, because of course you grew up in Punjab in India, and I'd like to know how that was for you, and also like how that influences your perspective on your work.
Yes, let me just come back to the screen, maybe. So yes, I am from Punjab, and the cultures across the border and my side are pretty much the same from what I hear. And life back home when I was living in Punjab was very simple. We were fakirs would visit our homes, and there was poetry all around, and the eucalyptus. I would wake up to the fresh eucalyptus groves and the freshest green ever, and the mornings would be misty with the sound of Gurbani on one side, and very timely synchronized with that of the mosque, and so it was pretty simple. And I remember I was always a nature loving child, so I remember this wind that would blow right at the onset of the monsoons, and it's if you're from Punjab, you might be familiar with this word called watershed, which is the wind, the freshest wind that the eucalyptus shrills generates. It's the coolest wind ever, and those are the memories I carry from home. And I used to paint a lot as a child through all of these experiences, and I used to scratch the bougainvillea on the walls. So all of that would manifest in later in my life when I took on as a textile designer and when I took on as an artist. So I think it's all a journey. Yeah.
And thank you for painting that wonderful picture and that rich imagery of being in the Punjab. I did feel like I was there with you at least for a few minutes. You just mentioned that, you've had this profession in the textile kind of industry, right, for many years. What was that like, and how does that inform what you're doing, especially with like natural materials and what you're working on even within the Sindhu Project?
Yes, I think perhaps I'd turn around the cameras because I'd like to show you guys some visuals as we go, as I talk about it. Can you guys see okay?
Yep.
Yes. So yeah, you mentioned that I was a textile, I'm a textile graduate, and then I was working in the textile industry for almost a decade. And my downtime, I was basically working in an international buying house, but I was very interested in the indigenous techniques just by virtue of interest. And, it was basically that, when I used to have my downtime would be spent in clusters of craftspeople and with weavers. My early interest was basically in textiles, so it started with weavers and people who were dealing with fabric. And then it went on to tribal arts, then it went on to crafts in general. And so these were one of the crafts these were one of the tribal arts that I was really interested in, called the Gons. So I would live there and I would stay with these people, not really exactly learning their craft, but really, really observing them. And, really, I I was very fascinated with with not just what they did, but how they did it. It was basically, their whole attachment to the craft, the way they lived their craft, the way they lived their art, the way they, things like they would balance skill with gut, or doing that led to happening. The way the family would forward, 7 generations of family would forward, not just skill acumen, but also instinctive acumen to the people, to the children further. That all really fascinated me, and in a way, these people became my teachers later on. And for the longest time, I probably thought that I might just I wanted to support them in some way because I was so fascinated with what they were doing. But after a while, after these visits graduated and they became a part of my life, I actually realized that I didn't want to support them. I wanted to be them. I wanted to be with them in the heart of labor, and I just wanted to join them. And, it so happened that in 2011, I moved to Chicago, and, a studio came along, and, I'd probably talk about that later as to how all that developed. But in 2000, somewhere in early 2000s, I visited the cave paintings in Bhimbetka, which was actually a turning point in my life in a way that, these paintings are in central India, and these are almost 10,000 years old. And these almost, left a very, very lasting impression on me. I was very enamored by the echoes of time that they kind of, brought forth. They were almost like a joke on archival, the way we talk about it, like they were standing the test of time. And, I was at that time making some experiments in my studio, and I would come back to that timeline. I know that I jumped it a little bit, but yes. So I think, the prehistoric cave paintings would, I think, be a very, very important happening, which led to many beginnings, very important beginnings later that would influence my practice.
Well, talk to us more then about that practice starting to develop, because we see all this inspiration, right? That's coming from multiple sources. Mm-hmm. What does that look like as you start developing your practice and as you start experimenting? Because you did mention that as well. What was that experimental phase like?
Yes, I think, like I mentioned, I moved to 2011 to Chicago in 2011, and by about 2012, I had my own studio, and there was a long phase of kind of trying to understand what I was really trying to do. I had so much knowledge behind me, and these experiences that had happened, they were very powerful experiences, but I wasn't able to really fathom as to where these were going. So the prehistoric paintings, the reason why I say they were a mainstay is because I was making when I visited them in 2000, in 2013, as I said, they basically, I was making some experiments in my studio with natural pigments when these happened. And when I started to read more about them, they just opened a whole new world of old world art to me, as in, very similar practices that were happening in Japan, which were very, kind of close to the prehistoric process. There were very similar practices happening in Himalayas, in the upper parts of Himalayas, called the Tankas, which were, the Buddhist monks. Now, again, practicing the base of the prehistoric process, which is grinding the earth minerals and, combining it up with animal fat and then painting it on surface. So, with all of that, I had a very hard task to really separate myself from the amount of knowledge that I had now and to really make my practice my own. So that's when the process of experimentation happened, and I started to gravitate towards I started to kind of work towards what materiality I was getting attracted to. Whether it was from back home for, pigments like turmeric, clay from back in India, from the riverbeds came along, muslin came along. But it took me a long time to understand their characteristics and their behavior. as to what they were trying to tell me, what was the story I was trying to convey. I mean, and I didn't want to force upon a subject upon them. I wanted my processes and materials to come up with their own story. And I mean, being a student of psychology, I know that, your unconscious mind can be really powerful. And you can really sort of, you need to kind of listen to it and really, really listen. So for for those 3 years when those experimentations happened, it was also a time of, listening, observing, and really kind of, delving deep into, the stories and the behaviors of my mediums.
That's something that I love so much about your work, is that nature and the natural process plays such a role in it, whether it's literally playing a role in it or it's inspired by that, right? And I'm interested to know, then, how does that continue to shape your process and your practice? And how does that then link back to what you're creating for the Sindhu Project?
Sure. I think the end of the period when the experimentation phase ended, as I had wanted, I tried to kind of look back and retrace steps, and there was a clear language that was absolutely glaring at me at that point. And I was basically trying to live my roots through these mediums. The mediums I was getting attracted towards, like I mentioned earlier, turmeric and bentonite clay, which is known as multani mitti back home, and muslin. And charcoal were all mediums of, that really took me back to the memory of home. And the idea of roots became extremely important, in my work to that point. And sorry to go back and forth, but yeah. So going back there, I'd probably share some of my earlier works that happened right after this phase of experimentation was over. I was invited to the Edward Albee Foundation for a residency. And, these mediums started to kind of tell their own story. I started, working with turmeric as an act of activating space. I remember I was there for almost a month or a little more. And, these site-specific installs would then become, actual works. And these works would actually celebrate the idea of roots, like this particular work, this particular series of work was called Sifar, which means zero, where, I worked with turmeric and, and muslin. And it kind of celebrates the idea of, I'm sorry, I don't have a muslin piece with me, but yeah, it's a series that comes with muslin and turmeric. And it basically goes into the roots, into my, philosophical roots of, the Indian philosophical roots of the East Asian philosophical roots of non-duality, where, it's a very strong message that is conveyed through, the Southeast Asian, philosophy about, that you are, it's not, you recognize that there are opposites, but the opposites are an integral part of each other. And many philosophies in Southeast Asia have talked about it. So I was exploring this particular philosophy, which is the root of many Southeast Asian philosophies, like I mentioned earlier, through this particular series. This other series was called Shunya, which is, again, Sifar is an Urdu word for zero, and Shunya is a Hindi word for zero, which again, talks about reflections and reality and how it all comes together into a cohesive whole. Then again, this particular series was made in bentonite clay that I was mentioning earlier, called multani mitti, which was back from Punjab. And this particular, I was living through, getting to my emotional roots. I was going through a phase in life where I wanted to break down the emotion and understand what was going on. And it celebrated the whole idea of that whatever aches you also cleanses you. So there was a duality, and there was a kind of a root through which of an emotion that I was trying to live through this particular series of work. So in every series that I made till now, it was basically my mediums, and my process was the message itself. I wasn't trying to separate myself from them. So whatever I was, whatever I chose as a medium, for example, in this particular, work, there were these needles of bentonite clay that were kind of pierced into a pure fabric. So, needles would be pain, but the clay is a cleansing medium in itself. So it was basically the same. The process itself or the medium itself was trying to tell a story. And
this is something about your practice, right? The holistic, intentional part of your practice, and how the process is just as important, right? Is something that's just fascinating to me, and I feel really appeals to me in the way that you're working. Just because of the sake of time, because we are coming close to the end of this session, I want to kind of continue talking about the Sindhu Project and what kind of mediums, processes, symbolism you're kind of drawing into that particular project. And I'm going to ask Mavish to join as you speak so that we can also take questions. But go ahead and start, and we'll have her come in.
Sure. The Sindhu Project, again, I would say in many ways is an offshoot of my, previous works. You'll see a number of features that are, that I'm trying to kind of delve in my previous series now, molded into the story of the Sindhu River. And what I've tried to convey, so in the Indus civilization, there were certain mediums that were very, very of importance. Terracotta was one. There was, muslin, cotton muslin was another. I've used a lot of riverbed soil as a symbol to a river that I'm dedicating this particular series to. And interestingly, that riverbed soil comes from the Chicago River, and that also becomes, a kind of now the mediums from my current home now kind of sort of help me to tell the language of my roots, my physical roots in the past. So I've tried to work with the Indus script. I've tried to work with terracotta shards. I've tried to complete the pot that I was mentioning earlier. There are works around that. The Indus is still a enigma, and a lot of it is still mystery, and a lot of it about it is unknown. So I've been playing around with voids. So along with mediums, I think it's also the processes. I've been experimenting with a lot of digging. With a lot of play of absence, a lot of destruction, a lot of play of elements where you use elements to make the work, but you also use elements to destroy the work. So eroding is an important part of this particular series. Digging, like I mentioned earlier, was an important part. So I'm almost in a process of excavating, in a way to retrace back steps through this body of works. And it's kind of, I didn't want the series to look like, you were seeing some specimens of the Indus from a museum or something. I wanted it to be an extremely personal journey that starts from me and kind of touches people, whoever sees it. I wanted everybody to see themselves, in certain form and type when they looked at these works, especially people from the particular geographical area that I'm trying to sort of, emphasize on. And so yes, that is what, a few more visuals, and you probably might see a lot of influence of the earlier series into this series, but now it kind of becomes its own language.
Well, thank you, Gunjan, for taking us through that. And I mean, both of you doing it so quickly, because there was a lot there and there's a lot to digest. And I'm really thankful for you opening up your spaces and doing these virtual studio visits. I know I've learned a lot, even though I've been working with you for months. So it's nice to kind of talk just about the practice for a little while as well. And I wanted to see if there's any questions from the people that are tuned in, and if folks would like to engage, this is a great time to do so. Otherwise, I'd just love to hear more about the collaboration between you two, because I know that it's still your own individual practices, but there is a collaboration. And what I've also liked a lot is, I think the collaborative spirit between you two for this project is really intentional as well. And I'd like to say it's almost like intentionally slow. And what I mean by that is, we talk about slow food and slow processes in making. And of course, you're inspired by these things as well. But I like that this isn't a rushed project either, in terms, and it may seem that way in terms of timeline, but you're really intentional about process. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And then Paige is asking us, when does the exhibition debut? It's June 10th. Hopefully there'll be some online and digital programming as well. And it'll be here until August 15th. And then you two can answer when it goes to New Delhi and Lahore.
Yes, it travels to Lahore and New Delhi. It's going to be up in Lahore on 16th of November 2021. And I think the same day it opens in, oh no, it opens in Delhi on the 26th of November.
Right.
And it's going to be on for a month over there as well.
Yeah, and we're hoping that I don't know how it's going to go, but it seems like Gunjan will be in New Delhi and I will be in Lahore. So we'll be able to have some sort of programming there as well to create that connection and bridge between the works and the project overall. So that'll be very exciting.
Another important thing that we're really excited about is these symposiums and the programming that we are trying to have around this project. This project, we're trying to sort of invite speakers who are experts in the areas. Mavish's area of the Gandharan times and my area of the Indus Valley excavations. So we're trying to talk to archaeologists and historians and experts in the areas to bring in the educational aspect of this age as well. And yeah, that's something that we're very excited about.
Any other questions?
To
yes.
elaborate on your question about the intentional collaboration, I think we have talked about that from the very beginning. We wanted to sort of keep it regional research and creating works in response to that. But as we are having our meetings and as we have been sharing our work images, we're realizing that, as Gunjan mentioned, digging is an element, or excavation part of that process. And for me, laser engraving, cutting into, and then ink rubbings as an ancient or I guess an older method of art historians going to the sites and taking impressions of architectural patterns. So there is a lot of this. I think there is a lot of similarities that we're starting to see in terms of how the work is connecting together, even though the materials are very different. I mean, as I am doing laser cutting, I definitely realize that it is very contemporary and totally not to those times. But the kind of impression it would hopefully give would create this ghost landscape. I hope so, once it's installed. Maybe Gunjan can add a little bit more to that, or
I think you've covered most of it, and to the point that you said that it's been a slow process. So there's a proverb in Punjab, and I think you might be aware of it. It's called "Sehaj pake so meetha hoye." So it's like the food is that is simmered is always sort of it's flavorful, and it's so there's something to the slowness of things that helps with the seasoning of it. So we're hoping that we are able to achieve that with this project. We've had some amazing discussions. We've connected, with each other on a very, very intimate and a very honest level. And I hope that this project is not the last, because we would really like this conversation to continue. We really, like Mavish was saying, that there is so much that keeps us, there's more that keeps us together than what keeps us apart. And I think both Mavish and I feel that in our own ways, we'd like to continue, that particular effort from our side.
Well, we do have one last question, which is from Shireen Ahmed, who's our co-founder of the South Asia Institute. And it's a good question, which is, how has working together altered your practices?
I can go first.
Okay,
For me, I guess this is just very unique and new to me, but I do think that this has opened up doors in many different ways. I think that I'm looking forward to exploring that further. But I think it just naturally led to it. I mean, we just met each other and started talking about, and then the project just came about from there. It was so natural and organic. But it's different from anything I've ever done before, and maybe Gunjan can add more to that. But it's definitely something very new to me, and I am excited for more possibilities and expanding it further.
Yeah, I think, I share Mavish's vision. So, it always helps when two artists are working on common visions. And she's been so strongly working on the lines of borders. And, I have joined her in a way in that process. For her, the subject is, from the subject point of view, is not, kind of new. And I think personally, I feel that, I'm a new mom and, see Mavish, sort of balancing multiple tasks at the same time. As an artist, my practice has become, I think, a lot more intense working with Lisa and her by just looking at the way they manage their time, So on a lighter note, that's been a good learning because, it's always kind of, you want to walk the line people, somebody else who you look up to has walked, and it always helps there.
Well, thank you, Gunjan. Thank you, Mavish. You both have taught me a lot in the process as well as today. Thank you to Lisa for that as well. And I'm glad that this could be our sort of pandemic project, if you will, something that we've been able to work on together, even though we may not be in the same space, but we will be together in the same space very soon. I hope all of you can tune in. Thank you to Paige and Ben from Art World Escape. Do go to the SAI Chicago Instagram and website as well, and make sure you stay tuned with what's coming up next with the Sindhu Project, as well as these two artists on their own. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Bye.
Thank you.